Today, we're digging into one of the biggest questions you can possibly ask. I mean, think about it. Is the entire universe a masterpiece that was created by God, or is the universe itself God? We're going to unpack these two totally different ways of seeing reality, all by looking at a single, incredibly profound letter.
Right off the bat, you need to know where this is coming from. This is not some dusty academic textbook. Nope. The whole thing opens with this incredibly warm, personal greeting. It's actually a letter from a spiritual guide, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, to his student, Hulusi. And that intimate personal connection, it shapes everything that comes next. You can think of this letter, which is called the Ninth Flash, as a kind of Q&A session for the soul. See, the students had sent it in their absolute toughest questions about faith, about the nature of things, and this is Bediüzzaman's direct response. So we're getting a really rare chance to listen in as a teacher guides his student through some seriously deep waters. Okay, so at the absolute heart of this letter is a debate with a real giant of Islamic thought, a brilliant and, yeah, pretty controversial mystic named Muhyiddin Arabi. This guy was a spiritual titan, for sure, but his ideas were so radical that people have been arguing about them for centuries. And in this letter, Bediüzzaman respectfully takes on his single most famous theory. Now, this is not some hostile takedown. Not at all. But Bediüzzaman frames his argument with a ton of respect. He's basically saying, look, Muhyiddin was sincere. What he experienced in his spiritual states was real, but his interpretation of what he saw, that's where he went wrong. So it's a critique of the conclusion, not a critique of the man's integrity. And that brings us to the main event, the metaphysical showdown. We're about to jump into the most complex idea in the whole letter, a concept called the unity of existence. It's a path that Bediüzzaman sees as beautiful, yes, but ultimately really misleading. So what in the world is this unity of existence? Well, at its core, it's the idea that nothing truly exists except God. Everything we see around us, the stars, the trees, you, me, isn't a separate creation. Instead, it's all just a reflection, almost like an imagination, happening within the divine reality. It's a pretty radical vision of absolute oneness. You know, the entire massive disagreement boils down to two tiny words, is versus from. For Muhyiddin, the universe is God, but for Bediüzzaman, the universe is from God. It's a separate, distinct work of art. It's like the difference between looking at a painting and saying, that is the painter, versus saying, that's a masterpiece created by a painter. See the difference? To make this super concrete, Bediüzzaman gives us this powerful analogy. Imagine God is the sun, the one true external source of all reality, okay? Now, the entire universe and everything in it, that's the mirror. The reflection of the sun that we see in the mirror is beautiful, and it absolutely comes from the sun, but it is not the sun itself. The fundamental mistake, he argues, is looking at that shimmering reflection and declaring, that is the sun. It's confusing the image for the source. So that's some pretty high-level philosophy, right? How does that translate into practical, real-world advice? Well, after tackling the very nature of reality, the letter shifts gears to more earthly questions, specifically about why Bediüzzaman tells his students not to chase after mystical, secret knowledge. One of the students asks about this thing called Jaffer, which is a kind of numerology, almost a form of divination, used to find hidden codes in scripture. And Bediüzzaman agrees. He says, yeah, it's fascinating, an absorbing and pleasurable occupation. But in the end, he sees it as a beautiful scenic route that can totally distract you from the main highway of your most important spiritual duties. And his reasoning has two parts. First, he says it's a discourtesy. It's like trying to peek behind the curtain into the unseen, a realm that really only belongs to God. But the bigger reason, the more important one, is that it's a distraction. Why are you chasing after these hidden secrets when the core truths of faith, the stuff everyone needs to hear, still have to be taught and defended? He's all about prioritizing service over secrets. And this is where the philosophical rubber really meets the road. Bediüzzaman starts using this whole framework to defend religious law against modern skepticism, especially from people who try to reinterpret sacred texts through a purely scientific, materialist lens. For instance, a doctor makes the argument that the virgin birth is impossible because, well, it violates the laws of nature. Bediüzzaman's response here is just brilliant. He says that what we call natural laws are really just God's customs. They're the way he usually does things. And just like any of us, God can choose to set aside a custom for a moment to make a specific point, to show that his will is ultimately in charge. So a miracle isn't a violation of the law, it's the signature of the lawmaker. He also makes this incredibly sharp distinction between the wisdom behind a law and the actual reason for it. Let's take a religious prohibition. The wisdom might be some practical benefit, like for your health, but the real reason for the law is simply that it's a divine command. He argues that our understanding of the wisdom can change over time, but the reason, the command itself, is constant. And the law has to follow the constant reason, not our shifting ideas about its wisdom.
All right, so how do we wrap all of this up? To summarize this entire complex debate, Bediüzzaman Zaman gives us one last beautiful analogy that just perfectly captures these two very different ways of looking at reality. I want you to picture the entire universe as a single, magnificent peacock. And it's covered in this endless, intricate, constantly changing art. It's just a work of infinite beauty. Now, two people walk up, and they both try to understand the artist who made it. The first man, he represents the unity of existence. He is so completely overwhelmed by the peacock's beauty that when he sees it constantly changing and fading, he falls into despair. So, to console himself, he declares that the creator must be inside the peacock, that the art and the artist are one and the same. For him, the missive is the scribe. But the second man, he sees that same incredible art, and he knows it requires an external, powerful, and purposeful creator. He concludes that the peacock is just a beautiful letter written by a scribe. His goal isn't to become the letter, but to read it, to understand it, and to praise the one who wrote it. And that really just leaves us with the central question, doesn't it? Both of these paths are born from a deep, profound love for the divine. But it forces us to ask ourselves, in our own search for truth, do we prioritize a passionate immersion in the beauty of the world, so much so that we risk becoming one with it? Or do we prioritize a clear-eyed understanding that all this incredible art around us is pointing to an artist who is beyond it? Where do we draw that line?